With Legion on the horizon, a lot of players are going to be running and rerunning Hellfire Citadel and other Warlords of Draenor instances, but many eyes are on the Alpha, where, for the most part, new mechanics are largely unknown. Knowledge will spread throughout the community, yes, but there will always be mechanics that take you by surprise, simply because you weren't expecting them. A guide might not always go over, say, what trash does, or you might not have a particular idea of how you have to approach a certain fight from a certain role. So, let's go over a few general tips and tricks so that when Legion launches, you'll not find yourself confused or surprised by new mechanics. Regardless of your class or your role, these pieces of advice should help you. First of all, take the time to read things. I'm not referring to written guides or blog posts or video guides when I say this. I simply mean that you should reread your tooltips. When your class changes, and it will be changed when Legion launches, you'll need to reacquaint yourself with its mechanics. Read every tooltip, keeping an eye out for changes in cooldown, resources generated, changes to percentages, things like that. A lot of players will look at guides. I hope to make my own guides when Legion launches, but the best way to learn personally is to just read things. Just have a look at it yourself. Of course, read and watch guides, but start by reading it yourself. Additionally, make sure to read your target's buffs and debuffs as well. As you fight an enemy, you may notice that it has an icon under its name. You can usually mouse over it to get some idea as to what is going on. Maybe it's just a description as to what the enemy is going to do. Maybe it's a buff that's quite dangerous, or a debuff that you can take advantage of. Make sure to mouse over any extra buffs or debuffs you get as well. You may find that a debuff could actually be extremely beneficial, or, nasty. The only way to find out is by reading it. Secondly, make sure you keep an eye on the game world around you. If you're facing enemies that put stuff on the ground, make sure to step in it once. Check to see what it does. Does it deal damage? Does it put a debilitating debuff on you? Or does it buff you? There are some fights in Legion where stuff on the ground is actually beneficial. In which case, does it also buff your enemies? Do you have to position them in a certain kind of way? Again, read your combat log, your buffs, debuffs, and enemy buffs and debuffs to get an idea as to how stuff on the ground works. Generally, if something is spraying out of the front of an enemy like a breath attack, it's probably bad. If you're a tank, make sure to always face enemies away from the group just as a default, because mostly if a cleave attack comes in, only you're supposed to take it. Always learn from what's going on around you. Thirdly, observe enemy cast bars. There are a lot of casters in Legion, and a lot of mechanics can be avoided with a well-timed interrupt. Naturally, find out what each spell does so you know which ones to interrupt, but by keeping an eye on enemy cast bars, you'll be able to prepare and react to mechanics that might not be interruptible. There are plenty of tells that an enemy does when they're doing a mechanic. They might do a particular animation. They may cast a spell, gain a buff or a debuff, say or yell something in the chat log, or flash your screen certain colors. All of these things means something is going on. Don't ignore them, especially early in an expansion where mechanics are much more likely to kill you. Fourth, and finally, watch your chat log. Very often, particularly dangerous mechanics that a boss does will be accompanied by a raid warning. Some of these even come with instructions as to how to avoid, remove, or compensate for the mechanic. It's also important to note that if someone knows what they're doing, they may very well mention in party or raid chat, oh hey, we need to do this particular thing or kill this particular enemy. You need to know if that happens, so keep an eye on your chat log. As always, keep your eyes open and don't just focus on your abilities. You'll get caught out otherwise. It can be a bit overwhelming at the start of an expansion, yes, but a good way to avoid being caught out like this is to get your rotation memorized and sorted out on a training dummy. Then you can jump into dungeons and raids and whatever else you want to do and kick some butt.